Welcome to True Crime Boss. I'm Jarrett Ferrantino. We're back in Idaho, Latah County, and as predicted, ladies and gentlemen, the defense has filed a motion for change of venue. What does that mean? That means Bryan Kohberger's lawyers have filed a motion asking the judge to move the trial out of Latah County, maybe into neighboring Clearwater, Whitman, or Washington counties. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a serious request. So far, everything you've seen and heard has been at the Latah County Courthouse. Now, the defense is saying so much press, so much exposure, so much effect and impact on this community has occurred that a fair trial for Bryan Kohberger cannot take place. Well, let's talk about it. Everyone is kind of getting this wrong, and it's a little frustrating. Here's what's really going on here, folks. The defense is saying there has been so much press coverage that Bryan Kohberger and his name and life have been picked apart, including aspects of his life that may not make its way into the guilt phase of this trial, may be known to prospective jurors and jurors. And if a juror has information that they should not know or should not consider, it can jeopardize the entire process. So they've asked the judge to move the trial maybe into neighboring Clearwater County, Whitman County, or Washington County. That is a huge request, folks. But let's break it down. I've seen these. I've dealt with them in the death penalty cases I've done. They're significant, but they're not that difficult to overcome. There's a little bit of a process and some strategy, and we're going to talk about it. Basically, ladies and gentlemen, my position is this request is premature, and I'll tell you why. Right now, we're staring down the barrel of a trial in the summer of 2025, okay? We are some time away from this trial. And by the time we get to trial, we are going to be several years away from the crime. Now, time heals all wounds may not be true in the case of the prosecution of Bryan Kohberger and our four beautiful victims in this case. However, folks, you have to realize people begin to move on with their lives. They're going to certainly remember that this happened. They're not going to remember every facet in detail of the case. So let's look at the situation and the claims being made. Is it possible to seat a jury in Latah County? Latah County has almost 38,000 people. The town of Moscow has about 25,000 people. Not a lot of people, folks, okay? And all of these people are well aware of this crime. And as I said in our last episode, you don't want someone who's not aware of this crime. So think about this first. It's not enough that a prospective juror, let's talk about a fake juror named Joe Smith. Joe Smith gets on the stand and you individually question a juror that comes in. And Joe Smith, he lives in Moscow and he knows that these four victims were killed and he knows that they were killed at the university and he knows that Bryan Kohberger is arrested, charged, and about to go on trial. Are those facts alone enough to knock Joe Smith off that jury? The answer is no. First of all, if Joe Smith didn't know about this case, Joe Smith would have barely found the courthouse, quite honestly, okay? You don't need to be a newsie or a web sleuth to know that this case has happened, certainly in this community. So what do we do with a juror who is aware of the case? You would ask that juror, Joe, with your knowledge of this case, with your experience thus far in this case, you work in this town, do you think that the information you have so far has prejudiced you or convinced you of Bryan Kohberger's guilt or innocence? And typically, folks, Joe Smith, our juror here, would say, you know, I am aware this happened. I know when it happened. I know where. However, I don't know all the ins and outs. I'm not aware of all the evidence. I haven't followed it that closely. And then the next question you would say to Joe is, well, can you consider the evidence that's presented on both sides if there's evidence presented from both sides? And would you follow the law that the judge provides you? And if Joe Smith says, yes, I think I can do that. And then you would say, do you have a fixed opinion about Mr. Kohberger's guilt or innocence? And Joe would look at the juror or the attorney questioning him and say, no, I don't. If that's the case, then there is a juror that can be safely seated on that jury. Folks, I've done death penalty cases. I've done one that lasted 9 years. And the defendant, his name was Hugo Selinski. Hugo Selinski was on the cover of each of our 2 local newspapers more than 50 times. And I mean cover, like his picture top to bottom. Everybody in northeastern Pennsylvania knew who Hugo Selinski was. It would be impossible to seat a jury in northeastern Pennsylvania with anyone who didn't know who he was and know that he was accused of murder. It is certainly comparable to the Kohberger case. We were able to seat a jury in our home county because it had gone on so long that everyone came in and said, look, I don't know all the nuances of this thing. I could sit and be fair and impartial. What if you get a juror that comes in and says, hey, I've been reading these Reddit articles. I know every conspiracy theory. I know that there's all these other suspects that didn't get charged. Well, that person is going to be a concern for the prosecution, maybe not the defense so much, but that's someone who may know too much. And although they answer the questions the right way and say, I can be fair, I can be impartial, you may have a concern for all the information that they have already been exposed to. The key here is someone is honest about what they've been exposed to and honest about their ability to fairly assess this case. Bill Thompson, the prosecutor in this case, keeps saying that the people of Latah County deserve the trial to be held in Latah County. I get it. From a political standpoint, that's a nice thing to say, but it doesn't mean shit, folks. To be honest with you, this is about fairness for Bryan Kohberger, and you may not like that fact, but that's how it is, and that's what Judge John Judge is going to be looking at, the fairness and impartiality for Bryan Kohberger. He's not balancing that against the rights of the people of Latah County. He's considering whether or not a jury can be fair and impartial seated in Latah County, period. That's it. So here are some other factors to consider. I believe it's premature because we are so far out from a trial that this is something that Judge can reserve judgment. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Judge can reserve judgment. He can reserve judgment here. He could say to the defense team, I get it. I get your concern. However, I'm not ruling on that until we at least attempt to pick a jury. That's the best time to assess whether or not we're going to be able to find individuals, men and women in this community, that can be fair and impartial. Let's bring in a panel of 250 people. Let's start asking them the questions. If after we're through 75, we can't get one juror because everybody thinks Bryan Kohberger is 100% knocked down guilty, then we're probably going to have to move to Whitman County. Or we may have to bring a pool of jurors, and no one talks about this. Another alternative is actually bus 250 prospective jurors into Latah County from one of the neighboring counties, which is another alternative. My prediction is, and I think if I was advising the judge, I'm not advising a law clerk anymore, I once was, I would say, give it time. Let's see how this plays out. Here's an example, and I think a great example to the Idaho situation. Many of you may remember the prosecution of Jerry Sandusky in State College, Pennsylvania. Ladies and gentlemen, life is Penn State in State College. It's the name of the town, literally. Jerry Sandusky's jury was a jury of his peers from State College. That trial was held literally in the backyard of University Park. If State College can seat a jury in the Sandusky prosecution, then I believe it's possible to seat a fair and impartial jury in the Kohberger prosecution. But beyond what folks may know about the evidence, another aspect of a motion for change of venue that people aren't really talking about are connections to the case. We've heard in the last hearing that there are 400 plus witnesses. Okay, let's assume for a moment 300 of those witnesses are locals. Okay, those 300 locals are going to have ties to that community of 37,000 people. Start doing the exponential math here. Okay, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. You're going to have a lot of interrelationships here that could be problematic. The other thing I haven't heard anyone really reference is the university is a major employer in that region. What if somebody works there? Is that a conflict of interest that students of the very university where you work as a custodian or as an instructor or friends of these students you may have encountered? You see, ladies and gentlemen, that's a bigger issue than a perspective prejudice that somebody may have been exposed to. These inner relationships that we haven't necessarily thought about. Maybe you know a police officer that gathered evidence there. Maybe you know an eyewitness that lived nearby. These are the kind of challenges that may start to present themselves in such a small community facing such a large prosecution. And these are the questions and things that have to be meted out. The only way to know is to begin that process in Latah County. And I promise you, this is a significant motion, one that had to be made. But there is really nothing comparable to this situation. Sandusky certainly is similar. But ladies and gentlemen, when you look at the degree of scrutiny that this prosecution has undergone to date, even the O.J. Simpson case, nothing has endured the social media and the web sleuthers of the world like the Kohberger case has. The first 30 days, remember that for those first 30 days and all the theories that were coming out and all the social media presence. There's never been anything like this, which presents a unique challenge. And that may be the difference maker in this particular case. But the defense team so far has filed a 2-page motion. Surprisingly, hasn't backed it up with an argument brief. One of the other things that typically accompanies a motion for change of venue is video of press coverage. Newspapers. I remember in our case, they were just stacking the newspapers with the defendant's face all over them and bringing them into court. I'm sure that's going to happen. But here's the other thing, folks. If you look at this case in particular and say, go online and Google Bryan Kohberger, look what comes up. I did it before I came in here. United Kingdom reports, India, Paris, Italy. It's everywhere. So what are we going to do? Try this case on Mars? No matter where we go, you're not going to escape the fact that this case has received an incomparable, insurmountable amount of coverage. I don't know that that could be fixed with a motion for change of venue. I really don't. Time will tell. I promise you we're going to continue to analyze these motions as they come, but take it from me, Judge John Judge is likely to reserve his ruling on this particular situation, and he's going to revisit this in 2025. We're going to continue to cover it, and not everybody is as informed as our viewers and the web sleuthers of the world. I know we think everybody follows these things as close as we do, but they don't. Everyone's doing other things with their lives. I don't know. Maybe they're not living as exciting lives as we are, but I promise you we're going to continue to cover this case and bring it to you. Please share your comments, like, and subscribe. We'll see you again soon.